Hi, my name's Gordon. We're in D9 today, covering everything that you'll need to know to pass your TC3 induction test. So what we're going to look at is getting everything powered on, getting some signal flow through the desk, and getting everything powered down. So let's get to it. So we're in the machine room of D9 and we're going to look at the power up procedure. So first thing that needs to go on is the rack. Next thing that goes on is back near the door that you walked through, we're going to turn on the power for the desk. After that, we're going to turn on the power for the monitors. And finally, we're going to turn on the Mac. So we've powered up the studio and we now find ourselves at the desktop. To get to this point, at the login screen, you'll use the user student and the password is student. So now that we're logged in, we're going to go up to the Apple logo here. We're going to go to location and we're going to make sure that it's set to AWS, which it is. After that, we are going to load this piece of software in the dock here, which is called Duality Remote. So when we open this, the status down here should say searching, and after a second it should find the duality, which it has. That's important if you want to use the control surface mode of the desk a little later on. Also, another handy feature of this software is if you go up here and click here, you can enter in the names of the channels that you're using and they will appear on the scribble strips on the desk if you want to do that. So next what we're going to do is we're going to load Pro Tools, which is in the dock here. This is the software that we're going to use to check our I/O settings, our playback engine, and we're going to set up a metronome in a little bit to test the analog audio signal flow through the desk. So once this is loaded, we're going to have to name our session. I'm going to call this TC3 induction, and just like on every computer that you'll use in the studios, you'll have to go to location here, you'll have to select the student drive, and it's best to create a new folder, name after yourself, and from this point on save all of your sessions in the one folder. So I'm going to call this TC3 induction. I'm going to create that folder and I'm going to open it. Before I create the session, I'm just going to double check that the bit depth and the sample rate are set to the settings that I want, which they are, so that's fine. I'll click create. So a few settings in Pro Tools before we get going with our audio. We're going to go to setup, we're going to go to playback engine, and in the playback engine here, we're going to have to make sure that HDX is selected. So you can see here something else is selected, which we don't want. So we go to HDX, we click that, and it's going to ask us to restart the session. So we'll do that, and we'll be back in a second once Pro Tools is loaded again. Okay, so now that Pro Tools has reloaded, we're going to go back to the playback engine and just double check that it has indeed reloaded with the preference that we wanted, which it has. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to setup and we're going to go to the I/O configuration. This is something that can change depending on the session that you're working on, so you always want to check it before you start. You have three things that are important to check: the input, the output, and the bus. The input should look like this. We should have A1 and 2, A3 and 4, and so on, all the way down to C15 and 16, and they should be checked like this. So you can see 1 and 2 are assigned to 1 and 2, 3 and 4 are assigned to 3 and 4, and so on. In Pro Tools, it's seeing three different hardware devices essentially. So it's seeing the first one, which is A, it's seeing the second one, which is B, and the third one, which is C. So it's a little bit confusing in that your track numbers will correspond to these. So for example, your track number 17 on the desk will actually come in as B1, for example. So you just have to think about that. The output, it should look exactly the same as it does. And the buses, we should have A, 1 and 2, again, all the way through. And you can see we're actually missing some here. So I'm going to show you what you have to do to get the default settings, which is what you're going to need. So what we can do is we can click the top one, we can click the bottom one, we can delete the path, and we can default it. And you can see now it has added C1 and 2, C3, 4, and so on. It's important to note that if you delete these paths and default them, it will delete your panning information if you're doing this on a session which already has work done to it, which can be annoying for 5.1 sessions. So there's a different method used for that. But for now, we're checking this at the very start, which is the best time to do it. So we've lost no information. We've gained all our buses, so it's time to click OK and carry on. The last thing that we want to check is if we go to Setup and we go to Peripherals, and we go to MIDI controllers, you can take a screenshot if you want of this section, and this is the information that the desk needs to communicate with Pro Tools if you are using the control surface mode. So normally you'll not have to make any changes here. If you come here and you check this and it says something different, you can ask one of the technicians to help you put it back the way it should be. That's set correctly, however, so we can click OK and on we go. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a click track just for the benefit of getting some analog signal flowing through the desk. And as always, I like to create a master fader at the very beginning of the session. To do that, I pressed Command-Shift-N, which brought up this menu, which is a shortcut. If you want to do it the long way, you can go to Track and create a new track. So we'll create that. I'm going to use the other window, which is the mix window, and I am going to push Command equals, which is the shortcut to do that. And I've done that because I want to see what these outputs are set as. So our master track here and our click track here are both set to output on A1 and 2. And that means when I press play, the computer is going to tell the prisms in the rack that we turned on earlier, is going to tell them to output the audio on channels 1 and 2, and that's going to come back on channels 1 and 2 on the desk. So when I push play, we can see our click is coming through there, and now we're going to go to the desk and we're going to find out what controls we need to get that signal flowing through the desk to the speakers. So we've got our metronome playing back in Pro Tools now, and we can see that channels 1 and 2 on the meters are getting signal. So let's get that signal to flow from the channels to our speakers. So we're going to go to the center section first of all, and what we're going to do is we're going to press clear, we're going to press select, and we're going to go down here to the button at the very bottom of the channel strip. We're going to push that, and you can see in the center section here, number 1 has come up because I pushed the button on number 1 channel. I'm going to use the 2 button, and it has automatically set it to channel number 2. So that's fine. We want to control channels number 1 and 2. If we wanted to control more, now that I've pushed this 2 button, I could, for example, push a button on a different channel and it would select every channel in between. But we want 1 and 2 for now. And we can see that those are selected because the white box around the meters on the bridge is selected. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here to the channel input, and currently it's set to line, which is correct, and also this input flip button is not turned on, which is also correct. That's very important. Next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to assign channels 1 and 2 to a master or to a mix bus. So we have 3 mix buses labeled A, B, and C. These are just 3 independent stereo mix buses. We're going to use mix A for now, so I'm going to press this here, and you'll notice that on the meter bridge, mix A has gone from being in grey writing to being in white writing. Next thing we're going to do is bring the faders up on 1 and 2. So we're going to set those to 0. And now I can see on the meter section in the center of the desk that our signal is traveling on mix A, which is perfect. So now that that's happening, there's a few other things that we have to take care of. The first thing is, in this section here, in this matrix, we have to assign our mix A, which is here, to our fader, which is this row here. And that's going to mean that this master fader is going to be controlling mix A, which is very important. So I'll push the mix A button because it's in line here, and I'll push the fader button at the same time, and you can see that that has lit up red and our fader has jumped to the up position. It may have stayed down here, in which case I would have to put it up to 0. Now that we've done that, let's have a look at the monitor section, which is just here. We want to monitor mix A because that's what our mix is traveling on. So we're going to select mix A in the monitor source. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to come over here to our monitor level. The cut button is pushed, which means that no matter what I do with the volume, it's going to be muted. So I'm going to take that off. I'm going to bring the level up, and we can hear our click coming through. One other thing that we're going to have a look at quickly in this monitor section are our speaker select buttons. That's these 3 buttons here. So in this studio we have 4 different pairs of speakers. With no buttons pushed at all, we have the big PMC QB1s selected. We push this top button, we have the near field PMC selected. Mini A is the Avantones, and Mini B are the Yamaha NS10s. If you want to use those, you'll have to make sure that the power amp in the rack is turned on. So to set up our headphone mix, we're going to use stereo QA on the desk to send our channels 1 and 2 to our hearback system, which is what we're using for our headphone mixes. So we go over to channels 1 and 2 on the desk here, and this top green knob here is what we'll use to turn on and control our stereo QA. So these knobs are also buttons, so we click them both on like that. You can see that the LED indicator has lit up. We're going to turn these up so that we're going to send some of this signal on stereo QA, and if we have a look in the center section monitor meter bridge, we can see the signal is now traveling on stereo QA. There's also a master for stereo QA, which is located in the top right section of the center section of the desk. That should just be left in the 12 o'clock position, which is where it should be when you start your session. If we go back over here to the channels, I want to show you how to use stereo QB. So stereo QA is a stereo send that you can use, and likewise B is just an independent separate stereo mix that you can use. So we're going to use this set EFX/QB button here. We're going to hold that down, and when we click this button again, it lights up QB. We're going to do that on both channels. So now it's on, and it's on QB. It's worth noting that you can't have stereo QA and stereo QB on the same channels. So that's now controlling stereo QB. If we want to go back to controlling stereo QA again, we push the QB button, we click the knob twice, and back it goes to controlling stereo QA. Now that we're over here looking at this at these channels, I want to show you a couple of other controls that you'll need to use. For example, if you want to process your signal on the way into Pro Tools, or you want to mix it afterwards on the way out. So one button I want to show you is this Dynamics In button located near the top of the desk in the Dynamics Processing section. We'll turn that on, and that will mean that the Dynamics Processing section is working on this channel. Equally, if we want EQ, we'll have to go to the EQ section here of the channel, push in the EQ In button. You see the little indicator light has come on now, and now the EQ section will be affecting any audio flowing through this channel. We can just turn that off again if we don't want to use it. So now we're going to go back to the machine room and just take a quick look at patching in some of the Ethernet sockets that we're going to use for our headphones. Let's take a quick look at the patching necessary for the hearback system. So over here on the right, we can see in the yellow section the hearback out, and you have 8 ports which you can assign to any of the ports that you need. So over here we can see live area panel A and live area panel B. Those are both in the live room next door. Booth panel is in the small live room just here, and we have further options as well. For example, the rear of the desk, which is the one that we use to hear back in the control room. Now these should already be patched so that 1 and 2 on each of these sections has a cable from the 8 outputs that we have. If you need additional outputs, for example, if you have 3 or 4 musicians near a single wall box, you can repatch these. So for example, if you wanted to use live area panel A number 3, you could remove one of the ones that you're not using. For example, this one. You could plug it in here and that would give you an extra headphone mix. So we've used the stereo QAs to send our mix to the hearback system. So we're going to test out the hearback system in the control room here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these units, and I'm just going to plug this Cat5 cable into input number 1 on the front of the rack here. Now this should be receiving the same signal as the Cat5 sockets on the wall boxes in any of the live rooms. And now my signal will be coming in 1 and 2, so I can just turn those up. I can turn my master up, and I can hear now that the signal's coming through on the headphones. So we've had a look at setting up our headphone mix, and we've gone to the machine room to make sure that it's patched in. The final thing that you need to know for setting up your headphone mix is how to talk back to your artists. And to do that, we'll be using this communications section at the bottom of the center of the desk here. This will allow us to speak to the artist via the headphone system. So if we push the talk back all button, these will all light up, and anything that we say will be sent to the artist on 1 and 2 on the hearback system. Leave go, the lights go out, and they'll not be able to hear you again. So now we've had a look at that, we're going to go and look at getting a microphone signal coming into the desk and getting it sent to Pro Tools. So we've already had a look at how to get the analog signal from Pro Tools flowing through the desk and monitor it, and we've also had a look at using that same signal for sending to the headphone mix. So let's take a quick look now at configuring our channel for a microphone input. So just like before, we're going to go to the center section here, and we're going to use these controls to configure the settings for the channel. We're going to use channel 25, so I'm going to push the select button at the very bottom of the channel, and I'm going to come up here to the channel input. Now this is set to line, and we want to use the mic input for this channel, so we're going to set that to mic. Up here in the input section, if we're using a condenser, it's important that we turn on phantom power, so that's located here. We also want to make sure that this input flip button is not turned on. Moving down the section here, the processing order is something that you can have a look at if you want to change the order of the EQ and the dynamics in the signal chain. The channel output is where the audio is going to leave the channel and go back to your Pro Tools session. So currently it's set to input, which means it will go through the preamp and then directly to Pro Tools. You can use these other locations in the signal chain if you want to. The channel meters is equally another thing where you can adjust the point in the signal chain where the meters on the LCD screen at the top of the channel are taking their reading from. Currently it's set to input, which is going to give you the level of the preamp, so that's perfect. What we're going to want to do to monitor this microphone channel in the control room is assign it to mix A, like we did previously with channels 1 and 2. And once we've done that, we're going to want to bring our fader up to 0, and we're going to go to the top of the channel here where there's a few more settings we have to look at. We can see the phantom power indicator LED is turned on because we turned that on in the center section. And we can see that we also have a pad button here that we can use if the signal coming into the preamp is too hot, so we can turn that on if we want to use it or off if we don't. We can finally adjust our preamp level with the red knob at the top here, and we'll begin to see our signal coming in on the meter, and we can adjust that to a point where we're getting a healthy signal coming into the desk. We've covered everything that you're going to need to know to get signal flowing through the desk and to get your session set up. So now that you're finished, there's a few very important pieces left to cover. First thing is you have to zero the desk for the next person. So that involves turning all the preamps down, turning all phantom power off, turning off any stereo cues that you've turned on, and resetting the EQ or any other of the controls that you've used to a neutral position. Next thing is it's very important that you tidy the room, including the live room, and leave it the way that you found it. If you don't leave these facilities the way they were, then you'll not be allowed to use the studios again. Next thing is to power down the room. The power down procedure is the reverse of the power up procedure. So Mac goes off first, speakers go off, then the desk goes off, and finally the rack in the machine room is to be turned off. And finally, when you're done and everything is packed up and you're ready to leave, make sure that all 3 of the doors are locked. So that's about everything that you need to know for using D9. Hopefully you'll be able to use all of this information to pass your TC3 tests, and then you'll be granted access to the studios.